This glimpse of our coming days before our sin lay. The fire, the fire. I wake today, the bed I don't recognize. You are the shade that still haunts me. I let moments pass, didn't recognize the signs. I thought there was time. The fire, the fire, the fire still burns. An image of your face still burns. From it I cannot escape. Still burns. I search for it in every moment. Floor that I walked back to the room with the light outside, sinking too soon, and I saw where you moved. Hands on the bark that's so dead outside, green at the heart, scent of the wind, fast as the day. It's just one more time, one other way, and I watch what I do, lit by the sky, and the night is coming. Ooh, ooh. Pull up the wind, I'm following with your fragments all scattered and free, and I'm taking you there, holding your hand when you touch the snow here in the land. There we go. Let's close that out. All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Coffee and the Crusades, the Real Crusades History live streaming show from the Real Crusades History channel. And I've got my coffee right here. Well, I'll be honest with you guys. I actually just finished my morning coffee, and I went down there to get some more. And there was none in the coffee pot. So somebody's going to have to make me some more coffee. Maybe my wife is watching this live stream and she'll go down there and make some. But anyway, this is the Real Crusades History Knights Templar coffee mug. You guys should pick one up. And, of course, we've got the good old Battle of Hastings T-shirt. Also linked in the description down below. How's the audio sounding to everybody? Is the audio okay? And I apologize for the mess behind me. Need to clean the studio up a little bit, but okay. Well, looks like we got a good group of people. Mr. Sam Botchick is here. Very glad to have him, because without him, Knights of the Cross probably would not have been possible. He brought a lot of the stuff we needed for the set. So that's good. So, alrighty. Okay, so a little bit of news, everybody. A new video will be going up later this evening about the second Mongol invasion of Hungary. Kind of jumping back into the Mongols. I haven't done a ton of stuff about the Mongols yet. I mean, I did something about the Battle of Ain Jalut a while back. This is kind of an interesting episode. A lot of people don't know that when the Mongols returned to Hungary in 1285, they pretty much got their rear ends handed to them by the Hungarians. So it's kind of an interesting episode. Typically we associate the Mongols with just total conquest and victory and just trouncing over everybody, but that didn't always happen for them. It's kind of interesting. Later on, things didn't go so well for the Mongols, so we'll find out about that. Also, if you guys want to do a paid question and help out the channel, you can do that by going to the link down below for powerchat.live. You guys will see that down there. It's a very easy system. It's through PayPal. So anybody who's got a PayPal can easily do it. And they pretty much give all of the Power Chat to the creator too. So that's kind of nice. But you guys will see that link down below in the description. And you can do paid questions that way. I will be keeping an eye open for those. If they come in, of course, they will get priority. Let's see what else is going on here. So, and then also just another update. Next week on Tuesday, Helena Schroeder is going to be joining me at this time. We'll be talking about her book, The Holy Land in the Era of the Crusades, Kingdoms at the Crossroads of Civilizations by Helena Schroeder. This is a really good book. It's about the Crusader states. I would recommend you guys checking it out. It's probably the best summary of the Crusader states that you can get right now in terms of readability. Lambert41 says he just finished it. So that's good to hear. And then John Phelps says, beautiful book. Yeah, it does look really good. And John, I think John was asking about the music earlier too. But yeah, John, that's my music. That's my musical project, Roman Lion. I have a couple of musical projects, one called Roman Lion. That's kind of a thing I do on my own. And then something called Ashen Ringlets that I do with my sister, which some of you guys may know about that. But that's generally the type of stuff I'm going to be playing on the live stream. Now with the videos, I do use more medieval themed music just to create that mood. So I use some of my stuff that has more of a medieval theme to it. I actually did this. Yeah, I know, John. I know you were kidding. I'm not. But I just wanted to explain the music to everybody. But yeah, okay. So there was actually a song I did recently, which it's an instrumental. It's called Yggdrasil. Let me put this in the chat here for you guys. Let's see here. It's I think it's kind of cool. It's Yggdrasil obviously is the Viking name for the world tree in Norse religion, which I think is a cool concept that you have the universe kind of centered around this giant tree called Yggdrasil. So, all right, but I'm glad to see everybody here. The usual crew is here. We got Tony, we've got D, we've got Tom, we've got John, Nalu, all familiar faces. Issa, Zytron, Thomas, Sheila. It's good to see everybody in here today. Tom, how's it going? How's it going, Chris? How's it going, Issa? How's it going, Zach? And who else do we have? We got a good crew here right now. So let's get started. I mean, if you guys want to start asking some questions about the Crusades, let me move this microphone a little bit. You guys tell me if does it still sound okay? Okay. Crusade. Nalu says Crusaders like to party too. It's not always Gregorian chants, right? Okay, cool. So, but yeah, I hope you guys will join me for. It's going to be on the 16th. I'm streaming at this time with Helena, and it's always a good time talking to Helena. She's very, very Very, very knowledgeable. And Sheila says, my first live chat for this channel, by the way. Well, thanks, Sheila. I appreciate that. I'm trying to beef up this live streaming channel. I know it's kind of stubborn of me. A lot of people keep telling me just live stream on the main channel. You've got, a couple 100,000 subscribers there. Why start a whole new channel? I don't know. I kind of want to have just a live streaming channel. But if you guys have not subbed to this channel, please do subscribe to this one just to kind of continue to build it up. John wants to know, why did the siege of Damascus fail in the Second Crusade? They didn't really have enough men to fully besiege Damascus. One thing about a lot of these eastern cities, like Damascus was a very large city for the time. It was one of the larger cities in the Mediterranean world. It had declined quite a bit since its heyday in the earlier Islamic era, but it was still a very big city. I think what appears to have been going on with the siege of Damascus is they were trying to sort of force a quick surrender of the city, and they really weren't in a position to hold out if Nur ad-Din brought relief to the city. And when that became apparent that he was going to do that, they had to withdraw. So it was strategically the right decision to do that. I recently read this big book about this whole issue called The Field of Blood by a guy named Morton. I think Nicholas Morton is his name. I think that he goes through some of this. I think the reality is about the siege of Damascus is, for one thing, it was one of those deals too where a lot of the army didn't really want to do it. The Queen of Jerusalem at the time, Queen Melisande, and some of the other local barons suggested an attack on Aleppo or Edessa itself. But a lot of people wanted to do Damascus instead. And Damascus, the reality was long term for the domination of the Holy Land to be maintained, the Crusaders did need to I can't look at the chat when I'm talking. It completely distracts me. The Crusaders did need to capture either Cairo, Damascus, or Aleppo to really hold, the Syria-Palestine / Egypt region long term. Especially, Damascus or Aleppo would have done it, but Cairo would have been nice too. Anyway, so yeah, I think, again, I think just to answer the question, the big issue was they needed to sort of force a quick surrender of the city and force an assault on the city, and that would have taken care of it, which could have happened because Damascus was kind of chaotic at the time. So I think it was kind of a gamble. I think sometimes those gambles paid off for the Crusaders, but when you're dealing with a situation like that where you're an occupying force that is really, really always short of men and just doesn't have the numbers to do these massive campaigns, you have to take risks like that sometimes and try to calculate. You're dealing with an opponent that just outnumbers you so much that cunning has to come in play as much as brute force. So just if you've got a massive army, you can just fling a massive army at something. But a lot of good questions in here from you guys. Zach says, why didn't any pope join a crusading army? May have helped discipline and morale? Because the pope was so busy being the pope. That would have been interesting though. But I don't think discipline and morale was the issue ever on the Crusades. That's kind of more of a modern myth. The bigger issue was numbers. Usually, that tended to be the real problem. The Crusades were disciplined. Even probably the one that was the most loosely governed was probably the Fifth Crusade. There was just a lot of different factions involved in that, but even that, operated fairly effectively and came pretty close to achieving its goal. So, okay. Chris, what is one crusade myth that annoys you? There's a lot of them that annoy me. Let me just think of one right now. Okay, we just talked about the discipline thing. I think that's annoying when people act like that the Crusades were just kind of these unruly mobs that just sort of like poured into the Holy Land and just sort of flung themselves at things. It's just not the truth at all. Just because there's a fair number of defeats involved in the Crusades doesn't mean they were ill-disciplined. Louis IX's Crusades were very well disciplined. But again, they had a numbers problem for the most part, and you know, you can be very disciplined and still lose sometimes. Tom, were there any veterans who completed the first crusade, returned to Europe, then fought in the second crusade as well? I don't think so. By then, you're kind of a couple generations away. Generations were a little bit shorter in the Middle Ages than they are now. But even, considering that, that would be like, imagine like there was a war in the 1890s, and then veterans from that showed up to World War II. Now, we did have World War I veterans from the 19 teens who ended up being involved in World War II, but I don't think uh, I think that most of the guys who were involved in the Second Crusade were kind of like the grandsons of people who'd been involved in the First Crusade, as far as I know. Tom Griffin, do you think the Templars found refuge in Switzerland, and that's why the Pope later chose the Swiss Guard as his bodyguards? I don't think there's a connection. My understanding is that the Swiss Guard became a thing just because they were so effective militarily, and they also were available. Like, these were guys who could travel there and could be hired. So, but I'm not real up on my Swiss Guard history. So if anybody here knows better on that, please let me know. Speaking of the fifth, why was Pelagius allowed to take complete command and when his military experience was much less than others involved? Because at the time the church was at its most powerful, Pope Innocent III was the most powerful man in Christendom at the time. And he was concerned about what happened with the Fourth Crusade. The Fourth Crusade had pretty much become a Venetian war of conquest, and he wanted to prevent something like that from happening again. So he put a cardinal in charge. And because there weren't really any major European powers who were capable of challenging that, he was in charge. The Fifth Crusade was kind of a hodgepodge of a lot of different, more minor commanders, I guess we could say. I mean, I don't want to diminish the importance of some of these people. The King of Hungary was involved at one point, but very briefly. And that's another thing about the Fifth Crusade. You had a lot of contingents coming and going, coming and going, coming and going. A lot of the people who were involved weren't even there for the big defeat that finally happened. But the Fifth Crusade went on for a long time, like 5 years or something. They occupied Damietta for years. I mean, that's kind of an interesting thing to think about. I mean, Damietta was held by the Latins from something like 1218, 1219 to 1221, something like this. So that's a long period of time for that city to just kind of be occupied. We can think of a lot of things can happen even in a brief time like that. So we can think that, I mean, that was, Latin Christians were pretty well settling in there to operate. Oh, okay. This is interesting. Scott Amos, our buddy Scott, says Stephen of Blois fought in he fought in the First Crusade and the Crusade of 1101. He died in 1102 at the Second Battle of Ramla. So, Lambert says no. First and second, right? Well, First Crusade and the Crusade of 1101. The Barons' Crusade is a name given to the thing that happened, like in the 1240s, where they got the Muslims to surrender a bunch of stuff. 1239 through 1241, something like that. Don't quote me on that. Now let's look it up really quick. Barons' Crusade. 1239 to 1241. Got it. Okay. All right, guys. Nalu, about your series. I think you're talking about Knights of the Cross. Seeing how things are going in the media world, how glad are you to have gone through crowdfunding instead of relying on names like Amazon? I mean, things are going well so far. Is the truth? I mean, these are the resources we have. I think if Amazon approached us and said, "Hey, we want to fund your series," we'd probably look at that. And it might still. Sorry, I'm distracted again. Let me put this. There we go. That could still happen. I mean, I know that Austin has kind of talked with some of the big names, and they have expressed some interest. But we were very fortunate to find Cinema Forte, which I want to kind of show you guys their website. This group of guys who production group who ended up being the guys to do the show. Let me share their page here. And they believed in the project is why they wanted to be involved. They think that we're gonna raise the money, and I think they're right. And they're going to be a big part of that because of what they've been able to do. You can see some of the stuff they've done in the past here on their preview here. I mean, they're the real deal. These guys know what they're doing. Aaron is an incredible director. Greg, who does the visuals and the camera work. Let's see here. So yeah, this is their website. You guys can check them out, Cinema Forte. And you can even send them an email and tell them thanks for being involved. That we appreciate that. Let's see here. And then Zach is asking, why did the crowdfund reset on the money raised? Well, the stuff we raised so far, we pretty much used to make this pilot. So we raised a good enough chunk of money where that plus putting some private money forward also helped make this happen. But and also Cinema Forte helped us out a lot. So yeah, you guys are gonna, I mean, I'm excited for you guys to see what this is going to be like. And I think we're going to have like a little trailer or teaser that we can show pretty soon. Oh, here's an interesting one. Why is there no video made to destroy the false image Saladin has as the chivalrous ruler when in reality he was very brutal and cunning? That entire imagine was a creation of the Enlightenment. I mean, I've done some stuff about that in a lot of my videos. I've tried to, Saladin shows up in a lot of my videos, but that would be an interesting topic itself. Just like do a specific video on, was Saladin truly a model of chivalry? And we'll go ahead and turn off Cinema Forte's website here. I don't think that Saladin wasn't a brutal killer like somebody like Zengi or Baibars or some of these guys the Crusaders faced. But he definitely wasn't like this idea that, like in Kingdom of Heaven, they show him when he surrenders Jerusalem. Excuse me. When he surrenders Jerusalem, he lets everybody go without a ransom. He says, I'll let everybody go. You can, I guarantee their safety. When in reality, of course, is he had to be negotiated to that point by Balian of Ibelin, basically kind of threatened him, said like, well, look, if you don't come to terms with us, we're going to destroy all the Muslim holy sites in Jerusalem. And Saladin did come to a fairly reasonable ransom for the inhabitants, but it was still very stiff for a lot of them, especially the poor people. And thousands of Christian women and children went into slavery, who could not pay this ransom. Balian tried to. Balian of Ibelin is truly an admirable figure because he actually offered to stand as a surety to Saladin for all those who couldn't pay their ransom. And Saladin refused that because he probably knew that those people wouldn't be able to pay their ransom anyway. And, he wasn't going to be able to just hold Balian of Ibelin. But on top of that, I mean, he probably also refused because his army wanted booty. And not only that, but they wanted human plunder as well, which is, slaves. So yeah, and yet Saladin, but yeah, that is something that I think I should probably make something like that, just a video specifically addressing that issue. It'd probably get a lot of views, but it would also ruffle a lot of feathers too. But I mean, I do think in all of my videos, I have really addressed that. And I have pointed, I mean, Saladin was somebody who would use violence if it served him. Like a good example of this, when he was conquering Egypt, he massacred the entire Nubian guard after they had negotiated a surrender with him. And he did that because he was afraid that if he left them alive, this was one of the most powerful groups in the Fatimid army prior to his takeover of Egypt. And the reason he did this is because he knew that if he left them alive, they could probably effect a coup against him, because they had effected coups in the past. They were a very powerful force. He just wanted to get rid of them. And the way he was able to do that was he got them to surrender and agree to a and Lambert says here, I believe the brutal way he held power in Egypt is overlooked. Yeah, he ruled Egypt with an iron fist. Egypt was always, there was constantly stirrings against him, and he was never sort of like, it wasn't like this idea that he was just this welcomed overlord. I mean, there was plenty of resistance against him. But anyway, just to get back to the Nubian thing, he killed all these guys because he was afraid of them, and it served his political purposes. But it was very dishonorable. I mean, these people had surrendered, they had agreed to terms with him, and he just slaughtered them all. And not only that, but their wives and children as well. So, I mean, the type of brutality on par with somebody like Reynald of Chatillon, or William the Conqueror, or Genghis Khan, or whoever. I mean, your typical medieval warlord. So we okay, I guess that's probably good enough of an answer. But again, I'm distracted by a question here. What is the real point of talking about the Crusades, which ended centuries ago? So this is a weird question. The point of talking about the Crusades is talking about history in general. I mean, what's the point of talking about the Mongols? What's the point of talking about the Vikings? What's the point of talking about medieval Spain? It's history is important in itself. Why wouldn't we talk about history? That's the bigger question. What do you guys think about that question? That's kind of a funny question, isn't it? I suggest I detect a little bit of hostility behind that question. Chris says, by the way, congrats, Stephen, on that video with Brian Holdsworth. Yeah, that was an enjoyable video. Brian and I did a project together. I'd like to have him on this stream actually sometime, just for fun. But Brian's a great guy. Lambert says, always with the wives and children. I believe Reynald simply responded in kind. Reynald was somebody who could be very brutal when it suited his purposes. He sacked Cyprus. He brutalized Cyprus, which was a Christian island at one point. He did. And, one can question his methods in dealing with Saladin. I think that Reynald, he harassed Saladin's supply chains because he felt that was the most effective way to undermine him. And I think in some respects it did. Although I have seen some historians argue that actually enhanced Saladin's reputation as the defender of Islam. It kind of gave him the opportunity to present himself that way. So, that's questionable. But again, it's a similar type of thing. I mean, there were a lot of medieval rulers who would be very brutal if they felt that it was in their interest. And then they could be very kind and generous if they felt that was in their interest. And, the other thing too is medieval rulers weren't the most independent actors. Like, an interesting thing to contemplate is like Richard the Lionheart's execution of the Muslim prisoners at Acre. The sources, this is something that I think a lot of modern people would miss reading the sources, but the sources talk about how upset the army was when Saladin kept breaking the truce, and how this was really causing an uproar in the army and among the common people who were present as well when Acre had been conquered. Richard the Lionheart felt pressured to kind of answer the fact that Saladin was kind of double crossing them in terms of their negotiations. And similarly, I think that Saladin was under pressure after the Battle of Hattin to, make examples out of certain crusaders, like the Knights Templar. Like, we have to ask ourselves, when rulers behaved brutally, it's not necessarily just because they wanted to do it. They had followers and high-ranking, members of their council or whatever who could also pressure them. Popular pressure was a very real thing for a medieval ruler. I have heard some historians say before that in some ways kings were the least free people. There were a lot of forces acting on them to compel them to behave in certain ways. We shouldn't overplay that. I think that they had a lot of autonomy and a lot of room to act as well. Stronger personality kings could be more independent than weaker kings. But it's just something to consider that, like a king didn't always do something brutal just because he was sadistic or just because he felt like it. It could be that there were political pressures at play as well. So, yeah, Lambert says, add to the reason Guy was so despised for failing the attack in 1184. Yeah, I mean, we have to kind of read between the lines with Guy of Lusignan. Guy, I think a lot of people lost faith in him pretty early on. Um, he a lot of the upper baronage just seemed to not trust him, and he seemed to not have been trusted as a military leader. It couldn't. The issues with the campaign, the Al Fool campaign, which is what you're talking about, 1183, I believe, is actually when it happened. Um, I don't think it was necessarily just that he didn't do a head-on attack on Saladin. It was the way he handled the campaign in general, and a lot of the details to that are lost to us, I think. So we don't know exactly what all was at play there. Um, oh, did we get a power chat? No. Okay. Somebody do a power chat. Come on, guys. Uh, okay, but anyway, I think that there's a lot of stuff that could have been going on there that is sort of lost to us. Like the way he handled the campaign, I think a lot of people lost faith in him, and the way things played out at Hattin is interesting too. The reality is that I don't think Baldwin the Fourth or Richard the Lionheart would have gotten themselves into a situation like that at Hattin. But if they had, I still think they could have won that battle, because we know that a couple of the commanders, Balian of Ibelin and Raymond III of Tripoli, affected charges against Saladin's lines that worked, and they broke through and were able to escape. I think that if the army had been more cohesive under a cohesive ruler, you could have done that as a group. But what happened at Hattin was very quickly people started just trying to deal with the situation themselves, because Guy was an ineffective commander. You've got like a bunch of the infantry retreating up the hill, different commanders just trying to fight Saladin's cavalry on their own. So yeah. And this is an interesting one here. Never discount greed for motivation. I don't like. This is one of the classic ones, but I don't think medieval aristocrats were as greedy as they were concerned with things like power and honor. Um, like for a medieval king was most likely to take his fortune, and a medieval king was more likely to be in debt than to be like sitting on top of a bunch of money. They used money as a tool, but they gave it away. They gave it away to gain the loyalty of followers. So I think that's a very tricky, like talking about in terms of like the way we think of greed in modern terms. I think it's very misleading to apply that too firmly to the motivations of medieval rulers. I think that it's kind of you have to think about the way things actually worked in the medieval world before you start thinking I mean, because you don't want to just take modern ideas about like, being rich or something like that, especially in an age when it was when that sort of meant something different. So yeah, I'm not unless you know what you're talking about, you can't really talk about greed too easily in a medieval context. John wants to know, if you were living in Jerusalem in 1170, what monastic military order would you join? Well, I don't think I would join a monastic military order just because I'm more of a family man myself. But if I were to join one, it would definitely be the Templars. No question. Chris, what was the whole situation with Humphrey IV and Isabella? Well, we can talk about that a little bit tomorrow with Helena. she has some pretty strong opinions about that. I kind of disagree with her on some of it, but I think basically what happened was Isabella represented one faction. She was an heir to the throne, and these medieval people were very legalistic. At least medieval Latin Christians, that's another thing. People were very intent on doing things the legal way, and uh, oh, this is a good one here too from Sam. Yeah, greed. Questions of greed also suppressed the wealth could be physically carried off easily and transported back to Europe. Yeah, yeah. The idea that like the Crusades were about getting a bunch of wealth and dragging it back to the West is mostly absurd. Uh, that was not a thing. It wasn't at all. Anyway, but the thing about Isabella and let's jump back to that real quick. Um, hold on. I think that there was a faction that was trying to keep Sibylla and Guy out of power, and they crystallized around Isabella, and I think her mother, Maria Comnena, who was the Dowager Queen, she had been Queen of Jerusalem, uh, and her current husband at the time, Balian of Ibelin, were kind of at the head of that, and that would have been one way to um, maneuver for control of the throne. And I think that Isabella was mostly compelled to. I mean, Humphrey didn't seem willing to be involved in the plot, and Isabella was very young. She was a teenager, so I think that she was kind of a tool of one faction. So Mason Mead, love this channel. Thank you, Mason. Guys, FYI, if anybody here has not subscribed to the live streaming channel, please do that. I would appreciate that. Keep building up the numbers over here. Everything, nothing. It's tragic but interesting to me how Tancred built the Principality of Antioch and went into decline immediately after his death. It didn't happen immediately after his death. It remained powerful, pretty much right up to the moment of the Field of Blood. Again, this book I was reading recently, the Principality of Antioch was on its way to being the most powerful player in Syria. They came very close to controlling Aleppo and taking control of it. So, yeah, Scott says Saladin needed the money from selling slaves. He was nearly broke. Yeah, I mean, he, like most rulers at the time, he was in debt. And he was also under a lot of his followers. They wanted slaves. They wanted human plunder from the capture of Jerusalem. So, a good question from John. Why was Constantinople so easily sacked in the Fourth Crusade? Were the Crusaders allowed into the city? Because the Byzantine Empire was already in a shambles. That's the thing. A lot of people say, "Oh, the Fourth Crusade destroyed the Byzantine Empire." No, the Fourth Crusade was just a manifestation of the collapse of the Byzantine Empire. There was a dynasty called the Angeloi. If you look at their history in the 2 decades or so leading up to the Fourth Crusade, you will see how they gutted the Byzantine Empire. They had all kinds of civil wars with each other. They were inviting Turks in to sack each other's territory. They squandered the treasury on banquets and on partying, and that's the death of Manuel Comnenus was the real beginning of the end for the Byzantines in 1180. So, John Phelps, if King Richard hadn't died in France, do you think he would have returned to the Holy Land? No question, he would have. As soon as he had dealt with Philip II, he would have gone back to the Holy Land. The best crusade and the worst, except for the fourth, and why? Okay, in terms of the Holy Land, the best crusades are the first and the third, because they were the best run and the most successful. I'm partial to the third, just because Richard the Lionheart was so brilliant. All right, guys. Well, we're coming to the end of today's stream. This is good. We kind of have I'd say about 10 more live viewers than we had last time. So I think this little channel is steadily building an audience. Sam says here, there's a book that touches on the Turks and Byzantium. Yeah, I mean the Byzantine army was just a mercenary army too by the 12th century, and that was a sign of its increasing weakness. The Byzantine army was made up mostly of Turks and Western Christians, interestingly. So, all right. So let's just look at a few more questions here. All right, guys, send in a few more questions and then we'll kind of wrap things up, I think, for today. It's been fun as usual. I'm glad that we're doing this. Just as a reminder to everybody, this show, which is called Coffee and the Crusades, Ask Me Anything About the Crusades, is every Tuesday and Friday, noon Eastern U.S. time, 11 Central time. And then this last little question here from John: breed of horses the amount of knights were using? They were called destriers. They were kind of the heavier war horses. They were rooted in Arabian breeds of horses. Sheila says, I've enjoyed this and hopefully we'll remember to tune in again. Yep. Come back every Tuesday, every Friday. We go live on this channel. Please subscribe to this channel as well. Let's see. And yeah, yes, war horses. For the Westerners, yeah, I mean, their tricoples would have used something lighter for sure. Okay, and John says thank you. Well, thank you, John. Appreciate that. Okay, guys. Well, we will call it a day here. Oh, wait a minute. This is a good one from Chris. If Richard conquered Jerusalem when the Saracens returned in fighting and Saladin had been removed from power, there's a good chance of that. There's also a good chance that they would have turned around and retaken Jerusalem. So who knows? All right, guys. Appreciate it, everybody. We will get back at this next week. So yeah, please come back on Tuesday, the 16th. At noon Eastern time, 11 a.m. Central time. I will be joined by Helena Schroeder to talk about her book, Holy Land in the Era of the Crusades. And then from then on, we will hopefully have more guests on this show as well. So everybody have a good weekend and we'll see you next time.